Hello and welcome to Majlis and Markets, a podcast where we explore the trends shaping Islamic and global markets. I am your host, Hassan Jivraj. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave us a rating. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Majlis and Markets, or drop me a line at hassan@majlisandmarkets.com. In this episode, I'm joined by Dunya Mansour, a Dubai-based partner at the US law firm King & Spalding. She advises on setting up a wide range of investment funds, from private equity and real estate to Shariah-compliant structures. During our conversation, we talked about the funds landscape in the Middle East, the rise of Sharia-compliant funds, and why the UAE is becoming a major hub for capital and fund activity. Dunya Mansour, welcome to Majlis and Markets. Great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Dunya, it's really a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I first reached out to you in December, I think, of last year when I was writing an article on ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Market, for a publication looking at, why funds and hedge funds and asset managers are going to ADGM. And I found your experience, mashallah, it was really great. And I felt like your comments you gave to me were really helpful as well. And I'm really want to talk to you about ADGM, DIFC, and why funds are going to the UAE in general. But before we get into all of that, Dunya, could you give our listeners your early life and your background story?
Sure. So I'm Dunya Mansour. I am a partner at King & Spalding, and I'm based in Dubai. So I focus my practice on funds matter and mainly fund formation across all asset classes, from private equity, venture capital, real estate, private credits, infrastructure, master feeder structure, usually when there is an international nexus because of my international background. I do also some LP work for sovereign and quasi-sovereign entities in the region and beyond, and regulatory work. So in terms of my career, I've been promoted to partners on 1st of Jan. So it's a big step in my career, and I'm very happy for that, but also a lot of new challenges and opportunities for me. I've been at King & Spalding for 18 months. Prior to that, I was at Deckert for 5 years in Dubai also. And prior to that, I was based in Paris at Allen & Overy.
Amazing. And I'm sure our listeners are sensing the French accent. So you're obviously from France, right?
Exactly. As you can hear from my strong accent, I'm from France, born and raised in France, but I'm originally from Algeria.
Amazing. And Dunya, I think you told me before, you studied in France, obviously, and you did your training there in the beginning. What was it like working in France and then transitioning to the UAE?
So I worked in France for almost 10 years. And I studied there, of course. I studied law and international business. So I have a dual training. It was very interesting. I was focusing mainly on pan-European funds and working a lot with Luxembourg, Ireland, because there's our fund jurisdictions, as well as Paris, of course. So I've decided to relocate because I was working on high-profile Middle Eastern matters while based in Paris, because there was a strategic partnership between France and Saudi. So that's how I've been introduced to the region, doing certain very high-profile matters, traveling to the region, and I was amazed by how incredible the region is, and in particular the UAE, where I was spending most time. So I've been approached by headhunters, and I was like, why not? Let's try. I'll be out of my comfort zone, working in a more international environment, because working in France, I was working in English, but the environment was, of course, in French and amongst French speakers, and also see funds from a more international perspective, because the UAE are an international platform for global funds, rather than just being focused on European funds. So I relocated 6 years ago now. Amazing experience, and I don't regret it at all. And I don't think I could ever relocate back, to be honest.
And Dunya, in a personal capacity of your Algerian heritage, did you ever travel to the region before, in a non-work capacity?
No, I've always traveled for work, because like 6 years ago, the region was not as popular as now. Now, when you say you live in the UAE, the reaction is so positive, it's fantastic. But 6 years, 7 years ago, people were a bit more skeptical in Europe. So again, it sees how the region has grown, how the UAE are now perceived as a major hub for professionals. But I've traveled multiple times for work. I brought my husband with me because I wanted him to see the region, and we really felt in love with the UAE.
Amazing, amazing. And Dunya, you said you started off at the law firm, and then now you're back at you're at King and Spalding, and mashallah, like congratulations on your promotion. But like, tell me, what does a lawyer, a partner at an American law firm do day to day?
So it's a very stressful life, a very busy life. I'm not going to lie. We work a lot. So usually we start the day pretty early, and we end up at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So it's a very, very, very busy life. Also very interesting from both an intellectual and professional standpoint, because we meet a lot of very interesting people. It's a highly intellectual job, very challenging. But usually my day is spent doing legal researches, meeting clients, discussing structuring, brainstorming with my team, and everything fun related.
So is it like what they have on the TV with Suits, or is it very different?
No, it's very different. It's very different. There's no drama. There's no backstories. We really focused on work. We work a lot, and I have a fantastic team of associates. They are very dedicated and hardworking. But it's as busy as Suits will show.
Amazing, amazing. Dunya, like just before we get into like the funds and everything, like what drew you into law? Like I'm really curious because you said you did business as well, but what drew you into the law field?
So I was not sure what I wanted to become. Actually, I trained to become a journalist at some point. I did many things, but I wanted something which was between writing, but also business oriented. So I think law is perfect for that because it's the best of both worlds. It's still a highly intellectual, business oriented job, but we do a lot of writing and a lot of reading. So I think it fits perfectly my profile. And I'm really happy with my choice. But to be honest, I started just as a general topic that I could study. And then I ended up liking it, being very good at it. And I was like, okay, let's continue and see what we can do. And funds, it's even a step further because funds is really based on market practices. So we are really at the confluence of law and business. We need to understand what our clients are trying to achieve from a business standpoint and be able to write it in legal terms. So in the end, it fits me perfectly, and I'm very happy with my choice.
Speaking of funds, Dunya, like I really want to talk to you today. I want to talk to you about ADGM and DIFC, but before that, I want to talk to you about the funds landscape in the GCC. I've been covering the region from an economic perspective since 2012, 2013. And it's been like really interesting to the debt and equity and all this stuff. But how would you characterize the fund landscape generally across the GCC over the past couple of years?
So actually, it's an incredible time to be in the region for the fund business because it's been growing and it's very, very busy. So when I relocated 6 years ago, we were doing mainly offshore funds for the region. So Cayman, BVI, and others. Now, thanks to the political push from the region, the UAE are becoming a hub for funds. So we are setting up more and more local funds, DIFC, AGGM, onshore. We are also setting up a lot of Saudi funds. We do some work in Qatar. So the whole region is booming, and it's really now perceived as a fund jurisdiction, which is absolutely amazing because when I was in Europe 6 years ago, you would not even consider the region. Now, when we set up international fund structure with master feeders, we consider where to locate the feeder or the master. We will look at the region. We will look at UAE in particular and say, oh, should the feeder be or the master be in Singapore, in GIFC, AGGM, or Luxembourg? So now it's part of a jurisdiction of choice, which just shows how dynamic the region is for funds.
Dunya, just for our listeners, could you explain what exactly is the feeder and what's the master of a fund?
Okay, so the master feeder structure is where you have a main fund basically making the investments. And then you have funds that are set up in different jurisdictions for the sole purpose of raising money from certain investors. For example, regional investors may be more comfortable with a GIFC or AGGM fund or a Cayman fund, even though you have the main fund based in Luxembourg. So for example, we will set up a fund in the GIFC or AGGM to raise money from GCC investors. Or Asian investors are more familiar with Singaporean funds. So we will set up a feeder in Singapore, and the feeder will be fully invested into the master fund, which can be located elsewhere, like Delaware, Luxembourg, depends on where the target investments are. So this type of structure are becoming more and more popular in the region.
And are these like government entities or are they merchant families? Who are these people, these kind of investors?
So we do both. We do feeder funds for retail investors, so the general public, basically. But we also do private feeder funds, usually more for sovereign, quasi-sovereign entities in the region, family offices, and high net worth individuals.
Amazing, amazing. And like, what do you think the biggest trends are? You talked a little bit about the landscape and how it's changed over the last 6 or 7 years, but what are the biggest trends that are happening right now, would you say?
So a lot of things are happening in the region. It's absolutely fantastic and really, really fascinating what's happening. So, for example, private credit is a hot topic. There is a huge interest in private credit. This is a hot topic globally, but the GIFC and AGGM, they launched a private credit fund regime a couple of years ago, and it's becoming more and more popular. So private credit is a big trend. Master feeder structures, as I mentioned, big trend in the region. So a lot of feeder funds are being set up to raise money from third-party investors in the region, whereas historically we would set up the feeder in Cayman. So one of the trends is setting up in the region and no longer offshore. Another trend would be, of course, anything Sharia compliant. So we're setting up a lot of Sharia wrappers, again, for master funds. So you will have a main fund, which is conventional, so non-Sharia, but we will set up a Sharia feeder fund for Sharia-compliant investors. And we interpose a Sharia-compliant structures, so the whole structure becomes clean for Sharia investors. So this is also a big trend at the moment.
Dunya, one thing I wanted to ask you with regards to Sharia funds, obviously we're an Islamic finance and Islamic markets focused podcast, but someone was asking me the other day about Sharia funds, and I was talking to him about, people in countries like Saudi Arabia, like a lot of people still like Sharia, they don't do conventional, right? So it's quite important to have these kind of funds to cater to these kind of customers.
Yes. So again, it depends on the type of investors and what they do consider Sharia compliant or not, because certain investors are more liberal than others. But we've managed, because again, fund managers and investors in the region, they want to be exposed to funds globally, right? They want to be able to deploy in a variety of funds globally and also invest into the funds managed by the largest fund managers in the world. So we are proposing solutions for these investors through Sharia wrappers. So we can help them with the help of the Sharia advisors, of course, who will issue the fatwa for the funds. We can help structure things in a way that complies with the Sharia requirements.
That's fair enough. And would you say, like, for example, like, do they have a different risk profile? Islamic funds, do they have a different risk profile to say like conventional ones, or do they pretty much the same?
So usually, Sharia compliant investors, they are less, the risk appetite is less. They are really trying to optimize their investments so that they comply with their Sharia requirements. So you have two cases. You have the case where the fund itself is Sharia compliant and the investments are Sharia compliant. And in this case, of course, there will be certain investment restrictions, restriction on leverage, and so on, which of course will impact the overall risk appetite of investors. It's actually a safer investment in general. But then you have the feeder fund structure, as I mentioned, where the feeder is Sharia compliant, but the master fund is not, it's conventional. So in this case, the risks will be the same because the Sharia compliant feeder will be exposed to the conventional fund. So there won't be any difference. So it depends on what the investor is looking for.
But Dunya, like speaking personally, like you as the lawyer who's structuring these, would you say they really are Sharia compliant, or do you think they're just replications or kind of just like, like you said, just with different names of different products?
No, they're Sharia compliant. I would say, actually, it's even interesting because we tend to see a trend where Sharia compliant investors will rely on ESG compliant funds as being considered as meeting the Sharia requirements. So I would say they're similar to ESG green-like European funds. So they are truly Sharia compliant. We structure it in a way which aligns with Sharia principles, and we get the fatwa from the Sharia advisors once they're comfortable with the structure. But of course, the idea is still to provide exposure to the conventional markets, to of course get interesting returns for investors. So overall, yes, it is Sharia compliant. There are ways to structure it, but it's just more work, and it's a bit. From a cost perspective, of course, it costs more to be Sharia compliant. That's the main differentiator.
And obviously, it depends on like what the client wants, right? Because you're just saying what the client wants to do. So if they want like a certain risk level or certain exposure, they'll say this to you or to the structuring team, right?
Exactly. And we will work with the Sharia advisor to provide the most optimum structure from both a Sharia compliance perspective, legal perspective, and business perspective.
Dunya, are there any innovations in Sharia compliant funds, would you say?
So I would not say they are innovation because we are using the existing standard structure that are used in the Sharia compliant transactions, such as the Murabaha, for example. But I would say in terms of innovation, it's more in terms of exposure to new asset classes. So we are able to structure funds so that we can give exposure to private credit, for example. We've set up a Sharia compliant feeder being exposed to CLOs, which is quite new. So we're becoming more and more innovative in terms of opening the market to investors, to Sharia compliant investors.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Dunya, how does, you've talked about this just now for the past couple of minutes about the UAE. What makes the UAE, and we'll go into the different emirates in a second, but what makes the UAE easier or good for setting up funds compared to other jurisdictions?
So it's very interesting to see how the perception on the UAE has changed from a global standpoint. So UAE, you have two financial free zones. You have the DIFC for Dubai, and you have ADGM for Abu Dhabi. So now DIFC and ADGM are perceived as very reputable jurisdiction. They are subject to common law. Actually, the ADGM has a direct reference to English law, which provides fund manager and investor protection and understanding of the legal framework, better understanding, because they know what they are dealing with. So again, and the two regulators are very supportive, sophisticated. There is a strong regulatory framework. They know what they're doing. So it makes the UAE reputable place to set up funds.
So, Dunya, are there any challenges in setting up funds in the UAE, would you say?
So I won't call this challenges because the jurisdictions are becoming very reputable on a global landscape. Of course, there will be barrier to entry. I will say that the UAE, and when I say the UAE, I mean the financial free zones, are a crossover between Europe, where it's very heavily regulated and it takes forever to set up, for example, a fund manager, and Cayman, where it's more flexible, but less regulated, I will say. So it's the perfect combination of both. But that means, of course, the regulators will look at the fund documents, will look at who is establishing in the region, which again is a good thing, but also in terms of review, there is a thorough review of fund documents when you're filing and trying to establish a new fund. So I won't call it a challenge, but people maybe expect something more like the Cayman, but it's more regulated, which again is good for the region because it's creating a sense of security for investors.
And then, like, you talked about the DIFC. Like, what makes Dubai like a good place to set up a fund?
So it's very interesting to see how the dynamics in the UAE have changed, because we have two financial free zones, and in my view, they are not competitors, they are complementary. The IFC is perceived as the more international jurisdiction where there's no need to raise money from sovereign and quasi-sovereign entities, because Dubai is very attractive to the younger generation of investments and other professionals. So I would say DIFC is an international platform for international fund manager willing to be introduced to the region. And usually it's used as a first step before expanding to the other jurisdiction like Saudi and AGGM.
And what makes Dubai like a livable city? Is it like what makes Dubai so great, like the center of the world right now? It seems to be everybody seems to be going to Dubai.
I think because it's a vibrant city, the quality of life is fantastic. It is safe. As a woman, it's very, very important for me. That's actually one of the reasons I left Europe, unfortunately. I adore Paris. I was very happy in Paris, but safety was starting to become a concern to a certain extent. We have the sunshine all year round. It's a very international, vibrant place where you meet incredible people from all over the world. It's a tolerant place. I mean, like the UAE in general, not only the DIFC, but I think DIFC is still perceived as the busiest and the youngest vibrant part of the UAE.
And then Dunya, closely tied to the DIFC is what when I reached out to you was about ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Market. Do you think it's a rising star within the funds ecosystem?
Yes, as I've said, to me, it's not, there's no competition there. AGGM is another fund jurisdiction, like Europe. In Europe, you have multiple countries, multiple fund regime across Europe. And through the passporting regime, you're able to passport funds, which is now what we have also within the UAE. So AGGM, usually it's when there is a need to raise money from sovereign, quasi-sovereign entities. Is actually usually required to be established in the AGGM if you want to get a commitment from sovereign, quasi-sovereign entities in Abu Dhabi. It's also, a lot of people are also willing to relocate to Abu Dhabi because it's a bit less expensive than Dubai. Dubai is very busy again, a lot of traffic now, which is great. It's the ransom of success, right? So people who are more family oriented, looking for a quieter life, who would be considering relocating to AGGM. It's a fantastic place. Actually, I spent a lot of time there too. I literally split my time across the two jurisdictions. And it's also very interesting because, for example, they've set up the first green fund regime in the GCC region. So if a fund manager, a global fund manager wants to set up a green fund, they need to go to AGGM. And again, with the passporting regime across the UAE, it's easy to just passport the fund onshore UAE or in the DIFC. So it's becoming more of an integrated jurisdiction. And hopefully there are talks about the GCC passport, which would be fantastic for the region, because it will mean that you could set up a fund in Saudi and passport it into the UAE, and the opposite, the other way around. So that would be fantastic because it helps Europe grow the funds business very quickly and efficiently. So hopefully this will, the talks will be materialized with actual regulatory framework for the passporting.
Yeah, what's interesting also is like I visited ADGM first back in 2019, and like it wasn't as busy as it is now. Like as we met in December at ADFW, on the sidelines of ADFW, it's just amazing to see the development over the past 5 or 6 years, where it's come from. And like from what I see now, ADGM is like booming. It's like it's completely full. And you know they branded themselves as the capital of the capital. So like as you said, for all the sovereign entities, like ADQ, and some of the other ones basing themselves, and that makes it a very big draw. In addition to like things like the Green Fund, and also I think all the other one was that came to my mind, Dunya, was tokenization. I think they launched the first tokenization fund
Yes.
UAE, which
Yes, yes. Yes, that's super interesting. They're very innovative in terms of regulatory framework. That's what also is making AGGM very attractive. Also, the regulator is very supportive. What you have also in the region, which is great, is the development of fund platforms. So global fund manager willing to establish in the region, they don't have to set up their own fund manager because it can take 12 months to set up a fund manager. They can use and leverage a fund platform where there will be a third-party fund manager appointed to act as the fund manager of the fund. And they could be investment advisor or investment manager based on their regulatory status in their own jurisdiction. So again, the region is very dynamic. The UAE are really, again, at the forefront of all innovation from a legal standpoint, attracting fund managers from all over the world. It's a global platform perceived as neutral at every level and with, again, supportive regulators.
Dunya, as we bring the podcast to a close shortly, there's just one thing that came to my mind is that do you see any other Emirates within the UAE and by extension any other countries in the GCC which could become like a fund hub for itself?
So, of course, another large jurisdiction in the region is Saudi. So we set up a lot of Saudi funds, but usually they still target Saudi investors. But what we see, which is very, very interesting, what we are seeing in the region is master feeder structures, as I've mentioned, where the master in Saudi, an investor will invest into the Saudi fund because it gives them further protection. Saudi funds are regulated by CMA. They are familiar with this regulator. But we will set up a feeder fund for other GCC investors or even international investors like European, Asian, American investors in AGGM or DIFC. So it's absolutely fascinating to see this because it's something that we will have never seen before. Usually the feeder would be in Cayman and that's it. Now we see local multi-level fund structure being set up in the region.
And do you get a lot of clients like asking about Saudi, do you think, or do you think they're still a little bit hesitant?
No. Saudi is a huge focus for most of our clients. And as I've said, that the DIFC usually is the point of entry. Then the second step is always to expand to Saudi and AGGM. So again, Saudi is a huge focus. Most of our clients, they will at some point have a presence in Saudi. either set up their own fund manager locally or use again a fund platform to set up a fund.
And Dunya, what do you think the biggest opportunities are for 2025? You know, already we're in the end of February now, so like we've done 2 months, but do you think there are big opportunities coming within the next, say, 8, 9 months?
Yes, the region again is very attractive, in particular for the teams. So the investment teams, even the lawyers, I receive CVs from the best associates in the world on a daily basis. Everyone wants to relocate to the region. So this will create new opportunities because there's people want to be based here. It's as I mentioned, it's not only an offshore jurisdiction, it's really a jurisdiction perceived by people for the long term. People want to settle here and create the eco-business ecosystem and develop the country and the region. So I think in terms of opportunities, huge opportunities, people are very motivated. We receive requests on a daily basis. It's when Europe and is a bit more quiet on the fund side. So it's super interesting to see what's happening, and many things are coming forward.
Amazing. And Dunya, tell us any projects you may be working on, any upcoming projects you may be working on.
So yes, again, I won't mention names, but we're working on a lot of green funds, climate transition funds. So they're super attractive because they have the green fund label that they can use globally. We have a lot of master feeder structures, as I mentioned, in particular with European investors, European managers, a lot of joint ventures between local fund managers and European or US managers. We have a lot of also, again, European, Asian, we're doing a lot with Asia, South American investors willing to invest into the region or willing to establish a presence in the region. So we do also a lot of family offices set up because the region, again, is perceived as safe and providing a strong, robust regulatory and legal framework for investors and managers all over the world.
Amazing, amazing. And Dunya, are you active on social media, and how can people like get in touch with you?
I'm a very geeky lawyer, so I'm active on LinkedIn, and that's it. So yes, people can follow me on LinkedIn. I try to post as much as I can, and this is where I think you can get the most useful information for our business.
Amazing, amazing. I'll link it in the show notes after this conversation. But Dunya Mansour, this has been a really great and insightful conversation, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the year and going for the rest of the time.
Thank you, Hassan, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
If you made it this far, you must have enjoyed that episode. If you did enjoy that episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us bring you more great insights. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for the latest updates. Got feedback or guest suggestion? Email me at hassan@majlisandmarkets.com.